Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we have a special treat here. It's Reggie joining us, and we are opening up the Delta Talks. So you are my first Delta Quadra interviewee. Welcome, Reggie.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
So I just want to start by asking your type, your full type, and then you can start by beginning to share a little bit of your typing journey, how you got into OP.
Yeah, sure. I've been officially typed as an audio NETE, play, consume, blast, sleep, last. I've also been typed as a number one in the social types. My typing journey really initially started as just kind of me looking for help very pragmatically. I've always had an interest in MBTI and like personality stuff, like Enneagram and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure I probably passively consumed the Dave Superpowers videos when they were first coming out, like 4 or 5 years ago. But I was currently at that time I was in a job that was pretty challenging. And I just needed some help. And I think um, I felt as though objective personality just felt a little bit more practical, and a little bit more encouraging in its advice than a lot of other personality systems. So I reached out to them, just asking for help about work and stuff like that. They gave me a type, and then I kind of just fell down the rabbit hole from there. Um, I think from there, I've kind of, I guess in classic Sleep Blast fashion, I kind of have been spinning my wheels in a lot of senses. I feel like I haven't evolved past a very basic question of, trying to understand what sleep is, trying to understand how to see any, for example. I still find it very difficult to see that in myself and in other people, to be honest. Um, and just trying to understand how to, um, I guess, go on the hero's journey, what they talk about, in objective personality a lot. That's always been something that fascinated me, and I've made some very, um, juvenile attempts of going on this hero's journey. I think they were good attempts based on my knowledge at the time, but just looking back on it, just they still seem like very much me just doing more of like intuitive kind of nonsense and kind of expending of energy and kind of like bothering a bunch of people. So,
Mhm.
um, that's what I would say my typing journey is. And I guess now I'm in a space where um I'm very much focused on the sleep animal still, but just from a questioning standpoint, just questioning how to, like, what's its value, what's its purpose, how do you measure whether you've done sleep processing or not, um like why, like, and this isn't just limited to sleep, but for all last animals, it's like, why do Dave and Shan kind of talk about the last animal as being the solution to all your life problems? Because it doesn't seem as obvious to me, especially
Mm.
with sleep being such an amorphous animal, in my opinion, why that would be the thing for me to do out of all the problems that I have to solve my problems. Um, so that's where I'm at. Yeah. Hopefully that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, it does. So that's interesting how you said that you were probably passively consuming Dave's content, like without even knowing it. That's something that pinged my brain. I'm like, oh, passively consuming without knowing it. Doesn't happen to me. Consume last, it's like super focused. If I'm consuming, I know what I'm consuming. It's not happening passively
Mm.
in that way. So that was interesting. So you are play consume and ENFP, but a jumper, right?
Yeah.
So you are very, very much out there in a sense, like you actually know what's going on outside of yourself in the world.
You would think so. I don't think so. I think that I'm very willing. So what I describe as NT play is I think there's a willingness to throw out theories at random. I think that's something that I'm noticing in both myself and there's another type cousin of mine that's very popular in the community. We'll just kind of throw out theories of, oh yeah, this is this type. And I mean, I think everyone does that to some degree, but I think the comfort of like throwing a theory and then honestly changing that theory within like seconds is something that I think that I do a lot. I think that's something that you could see on my YouTube channel. When I used to do like my personal videos on OP, just the theories were just coming out of nowhere pretty much. Um, and I think the other thing that I'm very interested in I think with the NT play is I'm very interested in experimentation. So I've heard of sleep. One definition of sleep is investing for the long term. And I think my NT play is very much the opposite. It's very short term, like weeks long, maybe months long experimentations, whether it's with the self or with an idea that I had or with an idea that I've consumed, and just tinkering away at that just to see where its limits are, and then dropping it a few months later, right? Um, so that's what I would say. Yeah, but like when it comes to other people, I think I'm very um I have my theories and stuff like that, but I think I'm just as blind as probably a lot of other people when it comes to
Mm.
how people work or whatever.
Yeah, and also I think because what you're saying is that you're playing around with a lot of ideas and concepts and doing this NT block banging with people, sounds like you are doing it both on your own and with other people all the time.
Yeah.
And I think whatever our saviors are, we're basically not aware of that we're doing them all the time.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think you are, that's my guess, like you are more aware of the outside world maybe than someone who is blast sleep or sleep blast. But it's hard to compare that because we can't change, with each other. It would be nice to be able to change brains maybe for a day or two just to see the other perspective.
That's fair
But
enough.
yeah, yeah. But okay, so I'm thinking about because I'm trying to explore the quadras and the functions that are connected to each quadra. So with us, we don't actually have any functions in common. We
Mhm.
have we have the temperaments in common, like we're both NF and NT saviors in
Mhm.
terms of our animals, but all the functions are the opposite. So you have FI, I have FE. You have TE, I have TI. And the
Mhm.
same with the NE and SI for you, and I have the NI and the SE. And I know I mean, we're friends. We've been talking quite a bit, and you've been talking to other betas as well. Like, I want to explore the the differences we have in languages in terms of our decider axis, our observer axis. If there is anything that you think, like, what is the first thing you come to think of? Like the difference, or even something that you discovered that wasn't that different in terms of
Um,
those functions?
well, I think um I definitely it's hard to say. I think that the first thing that came to my mind when you asked that question was I think that there is a similar emotional life between um betas and deltas, um probably with all types really. I think just there's just like a core human um element. I know that we were talking about this in the context of FI versus TI, where you were making the observation that there were several people at TI, including yourself, who claimed that, oh yeah, we do have like very strong emotional reactions to things and to people and stuff like that. We just take mental notes of them, and then we just kind of build upon that later. Um, you know, I And when you said that, I was like, oh yeah, this seems pretty relatable. I don't see anything wrong with that, or anything different. Um, I would say maybe definitely one difference that I see related to FI and TI is that with FI, it's yeah, and it's kind of built into the type, but it's identifying with that emotional core, identifying with the emotions, so to speak.
Mm,
Uh,
right.
I don't want to go as extreme as saying you are your emotions, but it feels very much that way. Whereas I think with the TI, there's kind of a like yeah, I guess more analytical approach to the emotions, more detachment towards the emotions. They're not as personal. Um, so I say that like so for example, I mean, one of the things that I was processing with you recently is this notion of having this emotional core and having these emotional convictions that you emerge out of this emotional core that I have. Um, but I feel like people with TI and maybe even some savior FIs to some degree, there would be a little bit more of a questioning of those emotions and a analysis of those emotions. Um, and then honestly, I think this is another difference I see, at least with some people with TIFE, is that then there's this categorization of whether this emotional response basically should is warranted or not, right? Whether
Mm.
you should feel shame or not. That's kind of
Mm,
one of the big buzzwords that I've been seeing is that, oh, you should feel shame for doing this or for feeling this or for thinking this, right?
mm.
And I mean, I feel like I feel shame like probably the rest of us do, but I wouldn't feel I don't really track whether other people should feel ashamed of things, if that makes sense.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, there are
yeah.
quite a few things I'd want to unpack because this is interesting about our DI because we both are demon DI. We have DI third, but I'm wondering because when you mention about FI and are you not ever like don't you ever question your emotions or how does that work? Because if I look at myself, usually when I have an emotion, I will kind of search through all the layers of where did this emotion come from? Like I want to understand the root cause of it. And then I
Okay.
can kind of see what to do about it. Like, do I act upon this or do I, choose a different route? Because I can choose, regardless of what I feel, I can choose where to go.
Mhm.
Does it make any sense to you or how
It
do you?
it does. I honestly wonder if that has more to do with sleep, just period, than with any of the like feeling versus thinking functions. Um, because I mean I too I mean I will occasionally, let me put it that way. I will occasionally take a step back, especially if I'm having a very strong emotional reaction to something. I will occasionally take a step back and be like, okay, this is kind of weird. Like you said, where is this coming from? Is this worth feeling? If that makes sense. But usually, and I think this is my experience, is that number one, my emotions almost spring out of nowhere. So it's like I almost have no idea where these convictions or frustrations are coming from. So it's like it's hard to trace it back. Um, and the second thing is that I like for my emotional life, what I'm finding is that it's quite fickle, right? It's like one minute I'm feeling one way about something, and then the next minute I'm feeling another way. And I can't really track. It doesn't seem predictable, it doesn't seem consistent. Um, so and I have a frustration towards that. And I've almost given up on tracking emotions because of that. Because I'm like, well, okay, if they're going to be changing this often, then what's the point, right? Uh,
Hmm. Is it almost like the identity? you know, is it swayed as well by the changes in emotions or?
Is the identity swayed by the changes in emotions? Um, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by that. I guess how I would describe it is that I use my emotions as a barometer for where I stand on things. And it's like with those changes of emotions or with the absence of emotion even, it makes it very difficult to parse or understand what what my what I am where I stand on a particular matter. So
Mm,
it just becomes very frustrating. It's not as though the identity is changing so much as the identity is being very it's not communicating itself as clearly as I would like, if that makes sense.
mm,
Yeah.
right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, because I just try and see where is the difference between the TI and the FI. Like, yeah, we know the logic, we know the values, that talk, we've heard of it. Um, but how is it really different? Because I mean, I know what I feel. I know my emotions,
Mhm.
but I don't necessarily, I don't know, like they don't necessarily define me, I guess. I think
Yeah.
that's what I meant by identity.
Oh, okay. So then, yeah, when in that sense, for me personally, they define me much more. Um, and it's frustrating, and maybe it's because it's a demon or whatever. I don't know what the interpretation is per se, but what I find frustrating is that they define me, and yet I don't understand them as well as they are so turbulent, right? So it's not something I can easily grasp and build upon. It's this kind of murky, foggy experience.
Mm,
Um, One other way that I would describe my emotional life is I've been very much I used to think of masculine FI specifically as like, oh, it's this aggressive, angry, rage-driven, like powerful thing. And I think it could be sometimes.
mm,
But in my experience, at least with what I'm seeing with myself, is that it feels more like a small animal in the sense of it's very easily startled, it's very reticent, or it's very it doesn't want to approach me, apparent like it feels like.
mm,
And it's quick, yeah, it's quickly um running away from me, it feels like. And it doesn't have that aggressive force and that solidity that on paper it I feel like it should have. So I find it quite frustrating in that sense. So, um, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so I think we have had a little bit of an NFNT introduction to this
sure.
whole interview, and I'll see if we can answer a few of these questions that I had in mind in terms of your quadra. Um, Let me see here. Yeah, I'm wondering because you know your functions so well, what strengths do you believe that your quarter or the delta functions bring to relationships, to collaborations at work or at school, wherever?
Yeah.
How can you use your functions to contribute or to enhance, life?
Yeah, well, I think so. At its best, I think that the Delta Quadra is probably the clearest of the communicators of all the four quadras. You could attribute that to the ST Blast, I suppose,
Mm,
of having that clarity and having that logic just and tailoring that to as wide an audience as possible.
mm,
Um, I think of I don't know. I think of the Delta Quadra as like it's this combination. What I'm finding is it's this combination of these the writer poet archetype, so to speak, with like people that build like infrastructure and laws and governance and things like that, right? Like those are the archetypes that I think of. Um, where in each case you're expressing something through the clarity of at least my biases is you're communicating it through the written word, you're communicating it through these laws, these structures that you're building, um, these systems that you're building,
Mm.
and enforcing. Um, and so yeah, I think there's they're the most deltas are the most free to talk about like the anything they want, I suppose, just because of that clarity of expression, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, because our functions, again, they are opposite. So compared to your ST blast, I have NF blast. So usually I get that, like when my sister says, you're so unclear, I'm trying to express something, even now when I'm trying to express something, it's just, it's a feeling, it's an idea. It's not really something in the real world when I'm talking.
Yeah.
It's really hard to do that. And I think in our quadra, like my quadra, the people who can be more clear are those who are stronger in consume because it's ST consume. So when they share their consume story, it's pretty clear.
Yeah.
But when you're going to teach or, inform someone about something, you need to be more specific um, to pass on the information. And what you say with your ST blast, that is, yeah, it's a perfect tool for doing that. So you really hold an important place and role, um, yeah, in relationships, in interacting with other humans.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. There's probably more. I mean, it's one of those things with the Delta Quadrant that it's like it's hard. But honestly, for me, with all the quadrants, I find it hard to maybe this is revealing my type, but it's hard to limit them to a specific, oh, they do this. Like
Yeah, of
you
course.
know,
Hmm.
because I know people of all quadras of all types that are poets and that are lawmakers and stuff like that. But
Mm.
just the what I'm thinking of is that. Um, I think the yeah, that I'll stick with that. I do think there's also something like I'll say this. I do think there's also something with SF sleep that is unique.
Hmm.
Just based on the people that I've been paying attention to recently. So like Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's Play Last, INFP, Alice Walker, who's a Blast Last, ISTJ Jumper, stuff like that. Um, there's something about SF Sleep that I do think it brings something special to the world. I can't quite put my finger on what that is just yet. Um, but I do think it's pretty cool.
Hmm.
Uh, so I guess I'll mention that.
Yeah, I'm wondering what that is. I mean, it feels like you're onto something there. Like I'm comparing to ST sleep, for example. They seem to be perfecting something in the physical. Like I think, for example, my mom is an alpha and she can perfect, like if she's cooking, like baking bread or doing something, it's like so perfect after she's been doing this and kind of exploring it and from all angles, and then she just does it better than anyone.
Mhm.
Um, because sleep is about perfecting, right? So I'm wondering, is SF maybe perfecting art, beauty, things like that?
Yeah, maybe. Um, I mean the two examples that I kind of mentioned, they're both happen to be artists in some way.
Mm.
Um, I have a hard time tapping into my sleep, so I mean, but based on the conversations I've had with some friends of mine, it seems to come out in art for me as well. Um, I don't, it's hard to say. It's like I don't know if I would say perfecting art. Um,
Maybe not perfecting in that sense,
yeah,
like in the TI logical sense, but more perfecting it like it's this perfect FI, um, which isn't necessarily perfect, like literally perfect, but just artistically perfect. I don't know how to phrase that,
yeah.
but I think
Yeah,
you get
I don't
what
know,
I mean.
maybe. I mean, I think about, a few other examples that come to my mind. So it's like you have Martha Stewart,
Mm.
um, you have Tiger Woods, which is so his SIFI isn't particularly artistic. But he is, I mean, you could say that he's perfecting a craft with golf and stuff like that. Um, Sarah Robb O'Hagan, who's on the more extroverted side, so she's more sleep blast play with the SIFI. Um, but even there, I mean, there is kind of this. It's not even art. It's perfecting an expression of something. I don't know how else to word that. And
Oh, that's nice.
I
Perfecting an expression. I just have to blast it back before I forget.
yeah.
That's perfectly said. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, so it's like whether it's through the medium of golf or through the medium of with Martha Stewart, she had her culinary and you know, uh gardening and I guess pottery, I don't know what it was, but like her home decor and stuff like that. There's always this I'm trying to express either myself or this message in the world as clearly as possible. And I think another great example of that is Joseph Gordon-Levitt. So I recently watched that class, so it's kind of still fresh in my mind, where it's like he's trying to express these morals and these ideals that was passed down to him from um his parents. I think specifically about like relationships with women and stuff like that, and how they should be treated and how they are mistreated and kind of limited and stuff like that. So um, he kind of created this film um, and acted in it in a way where it's like he's trying to capture those messages without in a way without moralizing about it, without giving like an overview about it, without um it's just this expression that yeah, it's the snapshot of what's inside of his psyche basically. Um so anyway, I don't know if that makes sense, but it,
Yeah, yeah, it kind of does. And I'm also still holding on to the thought of expressing, like, I'm thinking of how, because it's SI, so the SI sleep is expressing itself in the physical, right?
Mhm.
And that's what Tiger Woods does, right? And
Yeah.
so how the other people that you mentioned, how do they express themselves in the physical, would you say?
Um let's see and I'm gonna just say this disclaimer. It's like I can see somewhat other quadras doing this as well to some degree. So it's like I do want to give that disclaimer. So it's like I don't want to
Because we've
I'm-
seen quite a few like Delta actors and actresses.
yeah.
and also singers, people who have been typed in class. So we know they're types and we know they are deltas,
Yeah.
because they are expressing something in the physical.
Yeah, it's like you're capturing it's a snapshot. I don't know how else to word it. You're capturing a snapshot of where you are emotionally, like at that time.
Hmm.
And you're capturing it through the words and you're capturing it through the images, and it's just this like
Because with FI, it becomes very aesthetic, right?
yeah, it can be, yeah. Um, so I mean, I'm just thinking through like, all the people that I mentioned, Rosamund Pike, who's another actress,
Hmm.
Adele, who's interestingly sleep last, ENFP, but still kind of does this to some degree with her music.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I don't know how to I don't know how to answer it. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, yeah. It doesn't
Yeah,
matter. I mean, it's just kind of we are exploring it as we go. You're playing, I'm trying to, I don't know what, teach it and learn while I'm teaching.
yeah,
But yeah, it's great. Yeah, because when I'm comparing that, I just thought of like my sleep, my NT sleep. It's more perfecting maybe the understanding of things, you know?
yeah.
Like I'm not really expressing it. Maybe I am when I'm blasting, but I don't know. It's more I really want to get the idea. I really want to understand how things connect. And I think with the NF sleep, it's more like on a very deep level, you have this vision, like this journey, like you see yourself fulfilling this whatever vision you have
Mhm.
of yourself. Um, yeah, it's interesting to see how they are different, our sleeps. But yeah, let's move on a little bit from that and maybe we'll revisit the sleep later.
Yeah, sure.
Mm. But I think what you mentioned when we were talking before the interview is that the social type is something you kind of um, know like more about, or it's easier to talk about it.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about receiving that social type number one, and
Yeah.
is that what you thought yourself, or was it a
I mean,
surprise?
I didn't know about it. Like it's funny. Like I think I was probably one of the first people to get socially typed. Um, in that I wasn't even asking for a social type. I was sending in this kind of rambly email to Shan about I was probably having like a manic breakdown, to be honest. So I was having all these random connections about I don't even want to get into it. But I sent them this really long audio and this article or whatever.
Mhm.
And and Shan's like, yeah, that was a lot of nonsense, basically. But then she kind of went into the social type. She was like, oh, by the way, I'm seeing in you that you seem to have this number one energy. And she kind of went into the description of it being, this drive to want to be at the top, to be the leader and all this type of stuff.
Mhm.
And I think I think that especially um I don't want to say earlier in my life as if this is so long ago. I think this still applies to me as of very recently. But, especially probably over the last 2 to 3 years, especially when I was like more active in the OP community, I think that energy was very present.
Mhm.
So it's like I was trying to like, post all of these articles and I was trying to do this YouTube channel and I was trying to host game nights and all this. Like I was doing all this like play energy stuff
Mhm.
to put my name out there, so to speak. And I think that and then also even like in the interview that I had with Shan, it's like I kind of just straight up said it's like, oh yeah, like I do see myself as wanting to have like a global impact on the world. Now I don't like I had no idea what global impact I wanted, right? To
Mhm.
this day, it's like it's not really clear what I meant by that, but it's like it was very I think it's very easy to see in me that I have that type. Um, and by process of elimination that I don't have any of the other types. Um, so yeah, I think um yeah, I think that's how I landed up on the social type. I just received it one day.
Mhm.
Um and then like going back over like my behavior and then going back over past journals and just always comparing myself to other people and trying to compete and saying, oh, I'm gonna show them and all this type of talk that was baked into my worldview. I think it very much kind of shows that need or that obsession to want to be great or whatever. Um, I kind of view it as nonsense now, but it's still I do still think it's there. Yeah.
Right. And when you say process of elimination, can you kind of see other people's types as well? Like when you compare yourself to them, if you can
Um,
you see if they are flex or friends or, you know?
it's I would say it's hard. I so for example, I do know there were some people who recently received their social types where there was a period of time where I was trying to guess their social type and I got them wrong, right? So it's like there are some people who were type twos that I thought were type ones, like Will Smith and stuff like that.
Mm.
Um, you know, um, so it's like I've been wrong. But I think that I do think that it's relatively I think it's easier to see when someone has flex somewhere, if that makes sense, right? Like
Right. Yeah.
I think it's pretty clear. There's probably only one exception to that, where it's like there's someone who's socially type 4 where I'm like, I would never have guessed type 4 for that person.
Hmm.
Um, but outside of that, I think it's pretty simple because I think um you're basically looking for that yeah, I guess flex is the right word. It's like you're looking for that puffing up of, hey, I'm doing this.
Hmm.
Hey, I'm going to become this, right? This announcement to the world, somewhere that you're going to become this great thing. Whereas, I think with the number four is it's like, I think the number four specifically, it's like there's it's yeah, I guess less is maybe the best word. There's less of that and more of, hey, this is just what I'm doing. Like, like,
Yeah.
uh,
And if I accidentally, make
yeah.
it, that's just by chance, more or less. Is that what
Um,
you're saying?
kind of, or like so. Okay, so I'm thinking of two number fours, for example. So it's like Arsenio Hall, which is actually the Q&A that just came out. So he had like this super like he was known for being the it guy, where it's like everyone would go to his show and everyone would go to his parties. Apparently, he had like house parties or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that's where you would go to get connected with all the like famous people in the industry, right?
Hmm.
So it's like, you know, but I think even then it's like he talks about his show as, hey, this is just something I was doing and then I just let it go, right? It wasn't this, oh, I'm Arsenio Hall now, right? There wasn't this puffed up, um, I've arrived, sensation in how he talks about the show. And then I think another example of a number four that kind of doesn't have the flex is Joe Rogan. Now, Joe Rogan's a little bit more extreme because of the DE,
Mm.
but I would still say it's like I mean, he has, if I'm not mistaken, he has like the largest podcast following in the world, if I'm not mistaken, right? But it's one of those things where it's like there's never this sense of he's never framing it as this big deal, if
Mm.
if that makes sense. It's just something he's doing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's what I meant. Like you succeed by accident. Like you're doing
Yeah.
your thing and maybe it works out or maybe it doesn't. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's very interesting. So in terms of you being a number one or like flex over friends, um, what kind of challenges have you experienced or even harmonies like in navigating differences with people who are the opposite, like or that you guess are friends over flex?
Yeah. So I think I have a very paradoxical type, social type to my 512 type.
Hmm.
They definitely they definitely feel like opposites or definitely conflict. Because it's like, so number one, the number one type is known or not known, but it's associated with more sleep-like, DI-like tendencies.
Hmm.
Whereas the number four or friends is associated with more DE or play-like tendencies, and I'm sleep last. So I think that I've kind of honestly, I feel like I failed at being both a number one and number four at different points in my life. Like I've tried to do the whole friends thing and I failed because I think I was a little bit too intense about it, and a little bit too awkward about it. And then I think I failed at being the number one thing because it's like I didn't have the focus or the direction or the drive or whatever else you need. Um, so I think um I would honestly, I feel like when it comes to relationships, like with other people, I don't I don't think that me being a number one is the reason why I, let's say, lost friendships or drifted away from other people actually. You would think so, but I think that with the play and with the desire to maintain those connections, that was I think that was honestly relatively balanced. I think where the I think where the number one thing really gets in the way is when I kind of get into that. Um, it's one of two modes. It's either I'm fully absorbed in, oh, I need to focus on this goal or this mission in order to improve myself, in order to get to the next step, and then I'll block out pretty much everyone. And it's in this very weird state because it's still demon sleep, it's still this demon DI, so I'm being very weird about it. So I know there was at least one instance over the past 2 years where it's like I was like I need to focus on sleep and I need to focus on recovery because I was like trying to, you know, be the best at the hero's journey basically.
Mm.
Um, and it's like I basically kind of cut off friends who were trying to hang out with me, and I think that definitely damaged those friendships. Um, the other area where me being a number one has damaged relationships is I've had, you know, um, I don't, it's this puffed up um ego trip. I don't know how else to word it, where it's like I feel like I'm on top of the world. I feel like I am the one driving everything, and everyone's kind of um secondary to me. I've gone through those swings, emotionally especially.
Mm.
And I think that I in those swings, I've definitely done and said things that have like been very damaging to people. Um, I think that yeah, I don't even know if I want to get into that, but it's been
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
it was pretty bad.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I can imagine how there will be like a conflict between doing your own stuff and, of course, me being FE. So how I'm wording it now, but like making sure that people around you are happy as well isn't a priority, right? Because you have this mission, you have this goal. So I guess the balance between the two would be like yeah, really a challenge because essentially you don't want to compromise on your own mission, right?
Yeah.
So
I think
how,
especially
yeah.
for me, when it's so hard, it takes me so long to find something I'm convicted about. Like it's already a frustrating process to get narrowed down to anything that's
Mm.
has substance. So when I finally find something that seems like it has substance, I don't want to, it's like I already worked really hard for this. It's like I'm not gonna like move for anyone else now. That's how it
Mm.
feels. It's it's this grasping really hard onto something. Um, you know, and not letting go for anyone else. Um,
Yeah. And I guess because I haven't been like typed by Dave and Shan, but I've been Habibed,
okay,
officially Habibed,
nice.
and number two. And I think I mean, that was my thought as well. And I've been triangulating with a few people. I think I'm friends of a flex, regardless of which number. Um, and I think I have the opposite problem of what you are describing. I think it doesn't really matter what side of the coin you're coming from,
Mhm.
but it's always going to be like in terms of finding the balance between the two. Because I can understand what you're saying. Like if you have finally narrowed down on something that's really important to you, and now
Mhm.
you really have that one goal that you want to reach, or yeah, that mission or whatever you want to call it. And you're building on this for once, now you're building on something. And so for you, the challenge would be to kind of be aware of, maybe, I don't know, be aware isn't maybe the right word because you are still tribe. So you're DE. But
Mhm.
yeah, really making sure that you are caring for, sorry about the FE language, um, but caring for your friends or family or whatever, your tribe is,
Yeah.
as you are building on your thing, because that is the challenging part, I suppose, if you are flexible friends, right? And so for with me, it's kind of the opposite. Like I kind of have to do. I have to trust that the tribe will be okay. Um, like without me being there all the time. Like it's
Mhm.
okay for me to kind of not leave the tribe behind, but give it a break, or just let them be for a while and then focus on me.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think I don't know if that's correct or not. I'm still kind of processing this whole social type thing, and it's still new to all of us, I guess. But yeah.
I think one thing I will definitely say that I do, and I think that potentially other number ones do, but I know I definitely do this, is even if I don't have a clear direction or a clear goal or a clear mission, I will make space around myself socially to where like I don't want to be bothered. Like I'm trying to create distance from other people to some extent that I don't already want to be connected to. Um, so that when that mission does come in, I can focus. Um, yeah, we were talking about this in the context of like family. So it's like I do this with my family a lot. Where it's like they'll ask me honestly, it's like, hey, do you want to go out? Hey, do you want to go visit this person? Hey, do you want to go visit this? And I'm like, no. And there's no like it's just an instinctive no.
Mhm.
Like there's no it's not because I'm necessarily more busy than usual. Um, it's just that I don't want to. Um, it's like I feel like I could be doing something more important with that time, even if I don't know what that important thing is. Now, I don't want to make this sound as though all number ones don't like their families, right?
No, I don't think so.
I think it's very, I don't know if it's FI, DI, whatever. I don't know how to explain in OP terms, but there are certain people that I want to remain connected to, but outside of that, it's like leave me alone.
Mm.
Um, I don't want to, I'm not even willing to make the effort to to socialize. Which is kind of weird because I think, going back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like I kind of with the play, I was trying to, especially earlier on, I was trying to do all this socialization. I was, right? I was on the Discords all the time and I was messaging people all the time,
Mm-hmm.
trying to maintain this. Um, but I would say even then, I was doing that because I mistakenly thought that that was a form of self-improvement, that hey, I need to be the type of person that maintains these relationships, that builds their network, stuff like that. It wasn't, this is going to sound bad, but it's like I think to some degree, um part of it was just like an insecurity and a void, I think, with the demon sleep, honestly. But I
Mm-hmm.
think part of it is, you know, outside of those, once again, outside of those few connections with people that I actually care about, it was more along the lines of I was doing it because it was my mission to do it. It wasn't because I actually wanted to connect with those people,
Mm-hmm.
right? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, I would engage because I felt as though engaging would make me a better person, right? I was
Mm-hmm.
I was doing more blast, I was doing more control or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
like whatever interpretation my mind had at that time. That I
So it
feel like,
was still the goal in itself that was the
yes,
important part. Yeah.
yeah,
Because there are a few things I do admire with the flex over friends, like things that I'm trying to learn from. And I think the assertiveness, I mean, there are good number ones and bad number ones, as Shan said before. So, but if you are like expressing clearly your needs, your goals, your desires, and respectfully, of course, and also standing up for those needs, and while you're respecting the needs of other people, I think that's something I can see in like good number ones that I want to learn from. Um, like I think people are more okay. Like now I'm processing from my point of view. Like they're more okay that I do my thing if I'm showing that it's really important, you know?
yeah,
Um, yeah. So setting the healthy boundaries, like not just crushing other people, you know, if it's, yeah, a bad flicks type, you know, they will end up being alone. And eventually if they do that. But if they are setting healthy boundaries to kind of ensure that they get their own time and, you know, their own well being, whatever they need, and also respect others' boundaries because they want to be respected, so they will respect others' boundaries as well.
yeah,
Like those kind of healthy traits that I see in some flex people are things that I really, really want to learn from. And yeah, kind of grab that and see if I can implement it. Can you see anything like that you can learn from the friends type? If I don't know if you've been thinking about it, but yeah.
Hmm. I think, yeah, just not taking, well, that's hard to say. What I was about to say was not taking life as seriously, but I don't think that's the right way of wording that. Um, it's more along the lines of, it's hard. Like the reason I'm having a hard time with this is like the fours that I know, it's like there's the DI versions and then there's the DE versions, and they seem very different to me.
Hmm. Can
And
you
it's like,
describe like how are they different?
yeah, I mean, I think, I think that so I mean so I'll just be very like blunt. I think
Mhm.
the number four supposedly that I'm thinking of right now is Uzair, right? Who's very public. So it's like, I guess I have to be careful about like not saying anything too weird, but He's been officially typed as a number four apparently. Um, he seems like what I'm processing is that he seems just as um driven as anyone else,
Mm.
driven and kind of focused. And I would say I would have typed him as flex, honestly.
Yeah, very much so.
Um,
But he's a DI, as you said. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So it's a little bit of a contradiction. So it's like and so I don't really see where the four part begins and ends in that type. And so therefore I'm like, okay, what really is a four really?
Mm.
Um, but I would say actually trying to connect with other people on their, I guess what I would say on their terms, if that makes sense. I don't know how else to word that. Like it's
Mm.
you're not doing it for um this goal that you have. You're not doing it because of anything. It's truly because you want to connect with those people. I think
Mhm.
that um I'm just gonna go back to Joe Rogan because that's an easier number four example to me, or I guess Arsenio again. It's
Mhm.
like being legitimately interested in the other person. I think is pretty valuable. And I think it's a good way of building relationships. I think that for me, um, even with the people that I care about, I it's very rare for me to legitimately worry about their life, if that makes sense. I don't know if that
Mhm.
makes sense. There's always a layer of um well, what does this like how are we gonna connect? There's always a selfish element. I don't know how else to
Mm.
uh,
How do you mean? Like, could you, yeah, give an example or just explain,
I mean,
elaborate?
so yeah, I mean like even with my friends, the people that I consider my friends, it's like I'm more worried about okay, how am I coming across to them? You know, like how long are we gonna stay connected? It's always a selfish uh in my view, it always is this, what am I going to get out of this and how for how long?
Mm.
And what can I do to maximize um what I get out of this, if that makes sense. Now I don't know if that's a number one thing, that just might be a me thing, or it might be explained by something else. Um,
It's almost like you see it as an investment
mhm.
of sorts. Like, if I'm gonna invest like my time and energy here in this connection, like it better be worth it. That
Yeah,
kind of reasoning is
yeah,
what
and I
I'm
think
hearing.
yes, and I think that I've been, because I think in the past I've been burned by trying to follow what I would consider more number four advice, where it's like be interested. What was it, Stephen Covey, like with the seven laws of highly effective people or whatever, where it's
Mhm.
like be interested in the person so that you seem interesting to them or something like that. I don't know how I'm probably butchering it, but that's the idea of it. I've tried doing that, but there's always a resentment I have when it's not, um, when that interest is not reciprocated,
Mm.
right? So it's like yeah, I do want a reciprocal relationship with things, and I think I get very irritated and very yeah, irritated, frustrated when there's not this reciprocal attention. So it's like I think that's where I'm like, well, okay, I'm going to invest, but only if I'm going to be getting something, you know.
Mm. Yeah.
Whereas I think with the number four, I would say archetype, because once again, I think, people like Uzair confuse me, to be honest.
Mm.
I think that with the number four archetype, there is a legitimate interest in that other person. And there's no like there's yeah, it's like I'm interested in you, like, let me help you, let me to sometimes let me take care of you to some degree, and there is no expectation in return. And
Mm.
I don't know how to do that. I don't know um I don't know how to give without having that expectation, whether the expectation is conscious or unconscious, secret or not secret. It's like I think I always want something back, right? And
Right. Yeah.
I think that there is a beauty in not needing that
Hmm.
that I could learn from. Yeah.
Yeah, because from like, I don't know, maybe it's my friend's perspective, if I am friends, um, or maybe it's my NI, I don't know. But the thing that comes to mind is that because what I hear is like this give and take, like what's in it for me. But the thing is, I'm thinking more long term here, so probably NI, like the potentially missed opportunities for growth, for innovation, synergy, like things that you can't really predict, only if you give it time. Like you can have a good feeling about someone and build on that feeling, you know, that's from my perspective.
Mhm.
And it may or may not pay off, but most likely it will, from my point of view or from my experience, that you will gain something positive, maybe not in the way you have expected. Um, but when you have that long-term focus of when you're building relationships and you are maintaining these positive interactions over time, things will appear that you could never predict, you know, like good things, positive things that will improve you as a person. You will you will grow in ways you never expected to, and you will find things that you never thought you would find. I don't know if this seems very NF hippies hippie like,
It's
but does it make any sense to you? Like,
I mean, I've definitely heard perspectives like that before, where
mm,
it's yeah, it definitely seems more longer term and it's more um almost karma like, where it's like you give to the world and somehow, whether it's from that person specifically, but some way that energy will come back to you, something like that.
mm. Oh, I like
Eventually.
that connection. That's very Annie of you too. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, sure. Um, I I I've tried on that perspective. I just don't, just in my experience, I think maybe whether it's I'm too impatient for that or I just have not seen that to be true in my own life. I'm just a lot more skeptical about that. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, it's like it's not something that I do. Um,
right. And also if you are not doing it, of course you will not reap the fruits of it, you know. It's kind of
right.
yeah, that illogical patience is required to be able to see that end result or the result over time.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's kind of built into it. So I guess that would be the challenge for from your perspective then to do something like that, which is interesting because you are still OE, so it should speak to your like to your OE, like keeping things open. We'll see.
I You would think so. But I think that I'm just far too, I don't know. I think that I've been burned too many times. Sometimes just because I've been overbearing, but I think sometimes just because of just situations where it's like I know I have my own needs, right?
Mm,
So it's like I don't, I'm very wary of investing too much now into other people if I feel as though those there's not going to be that reciprocation, right?
mm, mm,
Um, I'll try it, but it's like if I start noticing that, oh, okay, this is not, there's not the, there's not, you're not giving back as much as I was hoping for, then it's like I kind of um drift off.
mm. Yeah, it's so interesting to see how how strongly the social type also plays into our decision making, our way of, you know, seeing things. Because yeah, like for me, I'm double activated OI. So I should be more goal oriented. I should be less flexible and, less willing to keep things open. But it seems like the social type kind of plays in almost as much as the 512 type. I don't know if that's your.
Yeah. I think they compete, or I think they're equally strong forces, I guess I
Mhm.
would say.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Let's see. What else do I have here? Because I had a few questions for you. Um, we've been talking about goals. Maybe do you want to share like a little bit from your life in terms of interests? What are you like aiming at, or anything you'd like to share that you can see where you see your type or your human
Yeah.
like influencing your path in that regard? I don't know if it's a clear question, but yeah.
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest um motivation that I have, or goal that I have, is, so it's like I have a very hard time staying motivated to do anything. I have a very hard time experiencing meaning for anything, experiencing conviction for anything. It's just like I said earlier, it's just I have a very fickle emotional life. Um, but one of the things that I do think I've arrived at is I do want to experience some sort of transformation. I think I've always wanted something like that. I think just throughout my life, I've always, had these moments or these phases throughout my life where it's like I wanted to change myself into something else, something better, right?
Mm,
Um, and so the specific role model that I have is actually Shia LaBeouf, who kind of, like me, so it's funny, he's actually consume play in the OP system.
mhm,
But like me, he had a very public, turbulent life, like very chaotic life, very belligerent. Um, he was more on the DI side, so he was more unapologetic about it. But he was still very out there, and I can relate to that. And I think that, so within the past year, there was an interview, there were actually two interviews, but one specifically with John Berthal, on the podcast Real Ones, where Shia LaBeouf was invited, and he seemed like a changed person. I mean, to some degree, he was always kind of like I think, a good guy at heart.
mm,
But I think especially in this interview, he seemed like a calmer person, a more grounded person. Um, he seemed to have more of a direction, a stable purpose. And he seemed like a good person, like legitimately like a good person in
mm,
that moment. Now, granted, I don't know how long that's gonna last, but in that snapshot, especially compared to all of the stuff leading up to that, it seemed like such a thorough transformation. And so for myself, I think what I want is a similar type of transformation. Um, I I think that I don't know how. Um, I've been taking it. I've been doing a lot of things, like going through the motions with a lot of things. I've been doing, like, so for example, Shan did a animals class or live show. I think like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and she had like a slide for sleep lasts, like advice for the sleep lasts. Um, I've been spending an hour each day minimum, just going through the motions of, okay, fine, let me go back over journals or videos, and let me do a self-care routine and let me journal and go on walks alone and stuff like that. Um, Almost despite my doubts, despite my disbelief, despite my lack of
Mm,
experienced um benefits with those type of behaviors, I am kind of going through those motions in the hopes that a transformation will happen through that. Just based on what Dave and Shan say about the last animal.
mhm,
Um, I've been recently, so Shia specifically, he attributes a lot of his transformation to he went through rehab. He was like an alcoholic, so he went through Alcoholics Anonymous and stuff like that. But he also attributes it to connecting with a higher power, right? God, and I think he specifically went down the route of Catholicism.
mm,
Um, I don't believe in like a higher power. I think I've had my devout moments throughout my life, but I'm not at a phase where I feel connected to anything, or I don't feel as though anything bigger exists. But I kind of I'm beginning to open myself up to, okay, how would I be able to connect with something like that?
mm,
Um, so that pathway is a little bit less clear, just because it's like, I've been so burned out with Christianity, and I've looked into other religions like Buddhism, and I'm like, quite transparently, I'm like, this stuff seems made up. Like I can't really invest in this. It just seems very fantastical. But you know, that's kind of another thing that I'm open to. And then finally, there's just been advice that I've received from close friends, from Dave, where it's like, I don't want that advice to go to waste.
mhm,
So even though I also don't feel like those advice work, if that makes sense, I'm
mhm,
still going through the steps of um just trying it out and just giving it a chance. Um so yeah, that's what I would say. Um on a practical side, part of what this is going to look like is, so I'm studying to become a software engineer. And I'm about to start my job search pretty soon, and that's going to be a pretty tough period of my life because I've basically used up all my savings to go through this boot camp. So it's like it's going to be pretty hard. I'm not sure where I'm going to find my income and all this type of stuff. So it's going to be a very, very uh challenging period of my life. But it's like, I
mm,
think I still think the transformation can happen through those conditions. Um, and so I think that's where I'm at. Yeah.
mm. Wow. Yeah. Thanks for sharing all that. Um, I love what you said about doing these practices as well, just trying to implement your sleep animal in
Yeah.
different ways. Do you keep an error log as well?
I I try to what I found is that an error log and a journal are basically the same thing,
Mm,
right? All an error log is that it's a snapshot of time, right? Where you displayed an irritation towards something, or you were frustrated about something or whatever. I
mm,
think that those I capture those anyway when I'm journaling, or when I'm recording a video, or when there's just an audio or whatever. So it's
mm,
like, I think those errors are already naturally embedded in my system. I think
mm,
what's more difficult for me than doing an error log is actually reviewing those errors, because it's like I have a very visceral aversion to looking at myself, at my past self. It makes me cringe. I can't look at it. Like, there are past videos I can't look at. Like, I like my whole YouTube channel. There's like a 200 plus videos on my YouTube channel for no reason, by the way. But it's like I can't watch them. It's like,
mm,
because I don't believe those things anymore. I feel like I'm way too overconfident, or I'm over extreme on certain things, or I'm being weird about certain things. And it's just this cringe element. Similar thing with my past journals, similar things with my, past audios and all these other records of my life. Um,
Isn't that a
I think,
good thing though? Like if it makes you cringe, it means you have evolved, you have grown, you have, come somewhere further than back then.
Maybe I think yeah, I would say sure. I think what makes me I it's one of those things where I don't see the value of those cringes though, if that
Mm,
makes sense.
yeah.
I'm not gaining anything out of that besides a bad feeling,
Mm,
right? There are exceptions. So for example, there is a journal entry, the journal that I have from like 5 years ago, where it's like I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm actually, I'm not disgusted, I'm kind of amused. I'm like, okay, this person was very driven, very ambitious. He didn't accomplish anything that he set out to do.
mm,
So I'm laughing in my head thinking, oh yeah, you think you're gonna be here by 2022. Well, guess what, right? Like, but it's like outside of that, it's like I find it very amusing. I find some, and then there are some things that I'm like, oh, these are good reminders.
mm,
So it's not always bad, but I would say for the most part, um I don't see the value in it. I don't, unless I'm looking for something already.
mm,
Unless I'm already like, okay, I need to see how I'm going to how I went through this, and then maybe I'll look at the past specifics. But yeah, the cringing, it's just yeah, I don't like it, and I don't like going through that. So it's just like no.
right. So it's not like, because I do, look back at old videos, for example, and I kind of think when I'm watching them, I'm like, oh, that is something, either if it has changed, I can kind of see that and, oh, yeah, great, this has changed. Or if it hasn't, it's like, okay, let me go there and rewatch it closely so that I can, change it, so I can learn from it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess it's just different how we feel about those things. But it doesn't really necessarily make me cringe. It's more like, oh, yeah, that's back then. That's who I was then. And either I have learned a few things or not, but, I can still gain something like a perspective of some sort by rewatching it. So,
sure.
yeah, just hopelessly going over the same thing over and over again. But yeah, sometimes it can be helpful. But it's really interesting to hear your different takes on, I mean, something that I'm taking some mental notes of while you're talking is you're mentioning a lot of people just thinking about play. Like they always say that about play. It's random stories about other people. I don't remember how many names you have brought into this conversation. It's a lot of DE, a lot of play.
Yeah.
Just a little reflection on that. Um, yeah, I was also thinking of, is there anything like, if you could give advice to yourself, your younger self, because you say you have changed, and maybe there is someone out there who is close to your type, some ENFP or any a younger person, like, is there anything you'd want to say to that person, to your younger self, or to someone else?
Yeah. Um, I think so. Probably to my younger self, because I feel like like
Mm.
even people who are similar types, I feel like they're not as
They're different still.
insane as I am, if that makes sense.
No.
Um, I would say so I think the first thing I've just experienced throughout my life is that don't expect um life to be this passionate thing all the time. I think that I think honestly, most of life is boring, um, is what I'm finding.
Mm,
Like even the most glamorous, so it's like one thing that I've been looking at lately is I've been watching videos, like lifestyle videos, like
mm-hmm,
vlogs. about people who are software engineers, because I'm going to become a software engineer, or people who live in the city or whatever.
Mhm.
And even though people who are trying to like make their lives look good, like really fancy or whatever, it's like they're just spelling out, hey, I wake up, I go to work, I maybe hang out with my significant other if I have one. I maybe hang out with friends, and then I watch TV, and then I edit YouTube because they're all YouTubers. And then I go to sleep, and then I repeat that. And I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, that wasn't that much, right? And I think in my mind, I was always yearning for this larger than life thing, right? I'm going to become this larger than life person. I'm going to have this larger than life and stuff like that. And I think I think that if you wait for your emotions to be inspired or be drawn into those big emotions, if that makes sense, you're going to be waiting for a long time. I think most of the time emotions are very flat. They're very neutral, not in a bad way, but they're just neutral. And you have to find ways to continue living even in those neutral moments. Um, a positive spin on that, I actually had a conversation with about this with a friend yesterday. A
Mhm.
positive spin on this would be there are just times of stability where it's like things aren't moving super up and down. It's just they're just stable. It's like you just have to continue on during those stable times. And then, yeah, sure, when you have a conviction or when you have this opportunity to do something big, sure, go for it. But it's like I think this yearning and this waiting for something that doesn't line up with how reality actually works, I think it's
Mhm.
a setup for disappointment. I think it's a setup for doing really, really dumb things in order to try and feel that again, right? Basically chasing a high and getting yourself in trouble because of that. Um,
Mm.
I think, yeah, I think so. It's like, yeah, just acknowledging that not everything has to be ups and downs. It can be middle, and that's okay.
Right. It's
Yeah.
okay if it's kind of a little bit boring then, sort of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I mean that's been my experience. It's like, yeah. Um and then I guess I would say if there's anything else, I would say um this is kind of along the same lines, but it's like don't underestimate the joys of being normal or the importance of being normal, if that makes sense. I don't know how this might sound very counterintuitive, but it's in the sense of um like just like kind of like what I was saying with the lifestyle thing. It's like just taking care of yourself, finding a job that you can show up at and you're not miserable at, finding friends that, okay, not every conversation has to be this life-altering conversation. It's just you have friends. Um, and then, just kind of just enjoy the things that most people wouldn't brag about, if that
Mm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
And stop waiting for these stop waiting for these larger than life things. Um, I think that's what I would say. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That sounds like great advice. I love it.
Okay.
It's, yeah. Perfect. Yeah. Um, if you could trade like a function or an animal just for a day, do you have anyone? Any?
It would be NI and sleep easily.
Oh, wow.
Easily.
Why?
I think NI has an advantage, honestly. Like in this like in all of the things I care about, it has an advantage, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Like future casting, viewing these abstract categories of things instead of just kind of these hyper literal um seeing a singular pathway forward. I think I need stuff like that. So I would definitely love to experience that. And then sleep, just because I still don't fully get it. It doesn't make sense. I don't see the value of it. So it's like having that for probably more than a day. I would probably need to have it for a little while, but it's like I would need to experience firsthand, okay, this is why this is important. right?
Mm.
And this is how to do it. Like that's so then when I go back to my own life, then it's just like I can replicate that. So
Right. So we kind of ending the conversation with sleep as we started it. Um, yeah, I think, was it before the interview? We talked about how sleep is something that happens like when you're not prepared for it. It's
yeah,
hard
that was
to, yeah, kind of like when you are actually asleep, you're dreaming, you're processing things in your dreams. And when you're sleep processing in an awake state, it's happening accidentally. Because you mentioned something about that as well, that you feel like there are these flashes, like
yeah,
sudden realizations, or yeah, things that hits you in the moment that you
mhm,
didn't plan for. They just happened.
yeah,
Maybe you want to share a little bit more information on that before we end, because I was curious to know more about that. Because I
yeah,
think
sure.
as a savior sleep, I feel like sleep is just happening. It's just unintended. It's just, I'm going out for a walk, and it's just, things are connecting. Whatever experiences there have been, thoughts, feelings, whatever, it's just connecting as I am driving the cars, walking, you know, just sitting or lying down. It's just happening. And yeah, I want to hear your experience, like those glimpses, flashes that you were mentioning.
Yeah, so I think it's very similar. So I've been watching quite a few OPE classes over break.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's very similar to the consume last experience where there's with consume lasts, what Dave has described is they'll passively or unconsciously consume like without realizing it. Like they're just consuming stuff without realizing they're consuming stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
then one day it's like a burst of insight like hits them and then
Mm,
they feel like they have to go act on that immediately.
right.
I think it's something similar with my sleep. So it's like I'm pretty sure just especially just given how you've described sleep recently, it's like I'm sure I'm probably doing that unconsciously, but consciously I feel like my mind is blank or my mind only has one thought at a
Mm,
time. It's not like it's not like it's drifting really.
mm,
It's a blank canvas for the most part. And but then suddenly something will hit. Like so for example, me connecting so I'm very big into anime and manga and stuff like that.
mm,
So for me, there's this show called Blue Lock, which is like this soccer anime or whatever.
mm-hmm,
And there's this main character who his whole thing is I'm going to like he's depicted it's fictional obviously, but he's depicted as having these he's very in his head and he'll have these puzzle pieces, like these images of puzzle pieces representing some form of information about the game. And
mm,
he's trying to connect that with all of his other like information. And then when something clicks, it's like he unlocked a new level, basically.
mm,
And you know, I think for me, it's not like I was sitting there watching the show and I'm like, oh yeah, let me think about OP right now. Like, or maybe even after the show. It's like it was like one day, seemingly randomly, it's like my brain made the connection between that and sleep. And I'm
mm-hmm,
like, oh, this is an image of sleep somehow. And it's like it was a very, very strong emotional conviction that I had. And I'm like, oh, let me, and is a very sharp. And to this day, it's like I connect that image to sleep. It's like it's that connection isn't going to go away anymore.
mm,
But the process of getting to that connection, I couldn't tell you. It's just I was watching the show, and then one day I
mm-hmm.
woke up, and that was
Yeah,
the conviction I had, right?
yeah, that's how it happens. Yeah.
Okay, well,
See? We're all doing everything, right? But
yeah,
yeah, that's a very good description. Like when you said that the same for consume last because I can really relate to what you said. So probably the last animal is still happening, or at least when it's like an introverted one, but we're not as aware of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe the answers from God that Dave always talks about aren't really answers from God, but it's like this, um, you know, consume that happened when we weren't aware of it,
Mhm.
and it just surfaced,
Yeah.
and then we knew, kind of.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thought. Okay, Reggie. Any other last words you want to share with the tribe?
I don't know. I don't have anything else. I know it's been a while, so I appreciate you kind of giving me some time to, I guess, speak, I guess. Um, I think it's pretty meaningful. And yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
it's been great listening to you, Reggie. I really appreciate it. I have been missing you on your channel. Do you have, I haven't asked you like unofficially, but is there anything you want to share about the channel? Are you gonna,
I'm gonna be
revive it somehow?
I'm debating like shutting it down because of the job search. I'm not sure.
Mhm.
Just because I was such like a crazy person on my channel, honestly. And I'm like, I don't know if I want employers to see that. Um, but on the other hand, one thing that I have been thinking about is doing a lot more. I've been watching these lifestyle vlogs as I've been telling you. It's like I've been thinking about doing some of those.
Mhm.
Um, so that's been on my mind is like, okay, maybe just shifting the focus. I don't have any interviews planned because I don't really, there's not really people that I talk to anymore. Um, so it's like I don't think I would be doing interviews. Um, but yeah, that's where it's at. It's just kind of in this, I'm questioning it right now.
Mhm. Yeah, I see what you're saying about employers, but also like for personal reasons, I think it's pretty cool to have that whole like the journey. Like I was there back then, and now I'm here. Like being able to see that and even share it with the world is pretty cool, I think. But yeah, I can see your reasons and they make sense. Anyway, life, what did you call it? Like blog.
Like vlogs, yeah, like
Vlogs, yeah, vlogs, yeah. So keep us posted about those because when and if it happens, it would be really interesting to tune in and watch those. I would love to, and I'm sure the audience would as well. You're pretty well known in the community and you've been here for long, so I'm sure
gotcha,
it will be appreciated.
gotcha, will do.
Okay, cool. All right, thank you, Reggie, and good luck with the job search and everything else you've got going on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I hope you have a good day.